Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mr. Barikmo's Flipped Classroom for American Government. Today what I want to talk about are the various different forms of government and the various different types of government that we have as options. We talked in the first lecture about the social contract and how a government emerges from the social contract, but now we got to look at the different forms of government that we do have. And one of the key questions in an American government class is trying to understand where the founders got the model for government. Of course, one of the models that we look to a lot historically is the Roman Republic. And the word republic is from the Latin res publica, which means something of or from or by the people. And so the republic is a government in which power is held by the people through their representatives. And just as we saw in the social contract philosophers, we needed some sort of government in this large society to be able to handle the interests of every person in the society. If we look at a democracy, that was another option we had. Now, direct democracy was a little bit more difficult, but we knew we wanted the voice of the people, and we knew we wanted a democracy, and that's what democracy means literally. It's rule of the people. Cracy, the end tag there is a government, and demos, of the people. And so from ancient Greece, we take this idea of democracy. From ancient Rome, we take this idea of the republic. And we try to blend these two things together in what would become, and what is now still, the democratic republic in this democratic republicanism in our nation's government. And so democracy requires citizens to take part in this, where we can exercise power through voting or running for office or contacting public officials or somehow just being a part of it. The only way that this works, the only way a republic or a democracy works, is when citizens are engaged. Now, if we look at the kinds of Republican government there are, we talked again about direct democracy and representative democracy. And the difference is pretty basic. In a direct democracy, the people have a say in all things. What we're really talking about is any decision that needs to be made is going to be made by the people with a vote. That can't exist on a large scale. That can't exist on a scale like our country. It can exist in local levels, and it does on some local levels, but a direct democracy wasn't going to work according to the founders of our country. So what we need to understand and look at is a representative democracy. That's where an elected person is chosen to speak on behalf of others. We've made that choice. They are our voice in the system. If you look at it visually, the direct democracy is the government where people have an individual voice in government. So everybody in society is putting their input into that government. Whereas representative democracy is where we've elected people. That little red group elects one of their own to go to government. The green elects one of their own to go to government. And those representatives come together in that government to be able to do what society asks them. And then, in a perfectly functioning representative democracy, those representatives would go back. Those representatives would seek ways to communicate with their constituents in order to understand what their constituents want within our system. Now, it's not just representative government that we look at. We talk about direct democracy, we talk about representative democracy, but there's other kinds of governments out there that we could choose. Communism is a possibility. You've studied that in history. Monarchy, oligarchy, autocracy, all are very different systems, but they have various different pieces that we have to understand. So if we look at communism, communism really is developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. When we look at Marx and the Communist Manifesto, what he's really talking about is a system of equality. And that equality is the goal. And the only way we can get to that equality is by a central authority owning all of the means of production. And in so doing, you eliminate any private property. The government or the central authority controls everything and then distributes it out to the people. Everything is shared with the people. And the idea is that we ensure everybody has access to property. We ensure everybody has equal access to prosperity. The problem, though, is this system can definitely become corrupt quickly when the government removes all of the rights of the people. When the people have no say and they rely completely on the government, that's where we run into problems. Classic example of that, a current example of that, is Vietnam. The Republic of Vietnam is still, has been since the end of the Vietnam War, a communist nation. It's one of the few that's left out there in the world. Now, another form, obviously the founders had some experience with this, is a monarchy. And by definition, a monarchy has a king or a queen or somebody who's in the position of authority, and the ruling position then can be passed on to other people in the family. It's hereditary and it passes on to the ruler's heirs. If we look at traditional monarchies, the monarch has absolute power, complete and total power. We've had a lot of that throughout the history of Europe, but even still today, you have King Solomon of Saudi Arabia, who is from the house of Saud, who has absolute power over the people. More modern understandings of monarchy look like what we call a constitutional monarchy. The United Kingdom has a democratic government that's elected by the people that actually limits the power of the monarch. So much so that Queen Elizabeth II really is just a figurehead at this point. Another form that we look at is what we call an oligarchy. And the term oligarchy really literally means government controlled by a few. A small group of individuals, oftentimes people who are wealthy, have military power, but somehow they hold on to their control over the government at the expense of people's rights. If we look at a modern example of this, we can look to South Africa in the 20th century. That power structure was based on racism. Apartheid was based on white people in power attempting to control the people of color, the African natives, and the foreign people that are moving into South Africa, and as a way of promoting white culture and white power within that system. It definitely was ruled by a few. They were the minority controlling the majority. Then we look at autocracy. Autocracy is pretty simple. It's one person in power. The single leader has unlimited power and denies people fundamental rights. Of course they're going to deny their rights, because if we give people their rights, they're going to rebel and they're going to revolt. You look at Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, Saddam Hussein, classic examples. So, what do these governments look like? If you're a visual person, like I am, well, that's how I would look at it. In communism, the people are silenced. They might feel like they have a government, they might feel like they have a leader, a very controlling leader, but when it really comes down to it, what we're really looking at is the seat of power sits right here. And the seat of power, those people, the government, own all the private property and all the means of production. And the people on the outside here are left to fend for themselves or get whatever the government gives them. Now, if we look at a constitutional monarchy, these people definitely have power because they're electing the government and they're electing the representatives inside of their system. That monarch is still part of the system, but is limited by the elected government. Now, if we look at an oligarchy, you see there's no power structure from the people into this government because the people that are controlling it are those few. The oligarchy, again, is ruled by few in this case. And then, of course, the autocracy. There's no voice whatsoever from these folks, and the central authority figure, the single figurehead, has all the power, and that one person is the government. There's another one out there. It's not really a form of government, but it is a form of society that we have to understand, and that's anarchy. When we have a complete breakdown of government, then we get into that state of chaos. There's no organization or control, and for many of us, this could be a state of nature. Maybe there are no laws on the books, but now we have to begin to reform, we have to begin to redevelop a government. We can look at this comparatively, and we might feel like there's a democracy out there, or we might feel like we have power. In the case of Russia, they might feel like they have power in the choice. They might feel like they have the vote, but you can clearly see other people might be on the ballot, but are they really going to have that voice, or are they hindered by the system that Putin has created, or other leaders in other countries in pseudo-democracies have created? Save your questions for class. Ta-ta for now.